3D, the final frontier, to boldly go where, well, pretty much everybody else has been before me. But can I make my own 3D model and machine it out? Let's find out. Hello fellow CNCnutz and welcome. Today I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to try and draw my own 3D model. Now part of the reason for this is I'm not really that good an artist. I mean, just take a quick look at this one here of me and Chip out for a walk.
Is that meant to be me?
Well, who else does it look like?
It looks like it was drawn by a 3-year-old.
Look, I didn't come out here to be insulted. Could have stayed inside for that. Well, yes, I'm not that good an artist, to be honest. That's probably actually about my best drawing skills. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason is I never really had any decent software that was easy to use to do 3D modeling. Now, a big thank you goes out to Vectric, who a few months ago offered to upgrade my version of VCarve Pro to Aspire. Now that gave me the 3D modeling functionality. So I'm going to be using that to try and make my own 3D model. So let's see how it goes. So the first step in the process was to find a suitable picture to base my model on. Now I went online and I had a little hunt around and I found this particular colouring book picture of a horse's head. And ultimately what I want to do is I want to change it to look like this, a 3D model. So the first thing I did when I started making my drawing was I had to create some vectors around this particular horse's head here. What I ended up doing was I ended up tracing around my horse here to get the vectors that I wanted. And the first one I wanted was the horse's head itself. So I'll just turn that on and I'll turn off the bitmap layer. And you can see here I've traced around the horse's head. I then started adding other bits and pieces. So the next bit was the mane, and that's here. And you'll see if you highlight the mane here that it's actually the inside and around the outside as well. Likewise, I have the nostril, the ear, and that's made up of several parts of the outer, and then we're moving inner here, and then finally another inner part. We've got the eyes again, that's made up of 3 parts. We've got the eyeball itself, we've got the highlight of the pupil in the eye, and finally we've got the eyelid. The mouth, the tongue and the teeth. And I've got one labelled folds here, and they're sort of the detail markings of the horses, and where the neck is and where the cheek of the horse is here. And finally we've got the halter. Now to make these easier to follow as well, I've colour coded everything. They're all on their own individual layers, so I can just work on one layer at a time, and I think that made life a bit easier for me when it came to do it. So next I want to start looking at modelling, so I'm just going to turn all the layers off except for layer 1 and the horse's head. Likewise, I'm going to come over here and arrange my view. So I've got 2 vertical views. I've got just the outside model of my head and a blank 3D working space. Come over to the modeling. I'm going to select the horse's head here, and I'm going to come over here to creating a shape from vector outlines. Now I'm sure there's many ways of doing this, and I'm by no stretch of the imagination an expert on this whatsoever. It's just me having a play around and basically just enjoying the process. And I've got a base height here, so I can actually raise the model up a certain height to start with. I'll start with 3mm. Going to have an angle of 30, so I'm going to have a dome. I'm going to dome this entire area here, and it'll rise up at 30 degrees. And I'm going to limit the height of this to 9mm. I'm going to call this here body or base. I'll call it base, and I'm going to add this to my model, and it'll create here the base of the horse's head. So you can see it's rounded. It's got these strange pinched areas here, but that's fine. That's not really a problem. If I was to set no limit to the height, I'll make a slight change, but depending on the angle I choose here as well, it can make quite a significant change to the model, as you can see here. I'm just going to scale this to 9mm. That'll just set my height there, like so. So I'll just close that, and that's my first bit done. Now I'm going to come over here, I'm going to start a new layer, or a new level. And I call this level here detail, and I call this one here base. So next I'm going to come and I'm going to select a new layer. I'm going to select the main. And by just having the layer that I want to work on, I can select them easily by going like so. Create a new shape. And I'm basically just going to use this create shape tool to create these parts. So this time the base height will be 0. I want to put it on top, so I'm going to add it to this model here. I'll limit its height to 4mm, and I'll just apply that. And you can see here I have an angle. Again, changing this angle here will change the shape of the mane. I don't want to go too high. If I go too low, it'll flatten right out. Although it's not changing at the moment because I've got that set to 4mm. I'll set that to no limit. And you can see here the effect that changing this here actually has. So again, I'll just set that to scale that to 4mm. And that looks pretty good. Again, it has that strange pinched look to it, but we'll worry about that later. I'll apply that. And now I'll start a new component. And I think I'll do the eyes next. Now, as you remember, the eyes are made up of 3 different components: the eyeball, the eyelid, and the pupils. And before I get carried away, I'll just rename this one here to main. And now we'll start on the eye. And this time I'm just going to select one of the components here, basically the eyeball. Of each eye. Come here for modeling shape, and we'll give this here a name of eye. We'll just apply that. And I've got an angle this time of 40 degrees, but again I've limited it to 2mm high. So if we zoom in here, we can see the effect. And what's happened there is I accidentally unselected the eye. I'll just do that again. Now we're going to, again, I've added this on top of the model. I can now start a new component, and that will fix these eyes here, and it will allow me to select the eyelids. Again, I'll add these on top of the eyeballs. And I'm going to set a height of 1.3 millimeters. And there's my eyelids on top there. What I might do is I might flatten them off a little bit more. Might add a little bit of base height to that. And by adding that base height, it seems to round that off a little bit more. And by playing around with these sliders, I can change how things look. You can see it has a definite upstand here, and that's because I've added a base height, whereas if I had it at 0, it basically starts at 0 and then round its way up. By adding that small base height, I can get an abrupt change in here, which will make it look better. So now I'll go start new component, and I'll select the pupils. Again, I'm just going to add this to it and just go apply. I'm just going to have these here as flat basically. I'm just going to apply a 1 millimeter. I'll make it a little bit lower. Make it a 0.5 millimeter height. Change here. I just want them to sort of show up on top of the eyeball and follow the eyeball shape. So that looks pretty good. It's more a marking for painting in this particular instance. So I'll close that and we'll call those eyes done at this stage. Next I'm going to have a look at the halter. So I'm going to select the outline of the halter. And I'm just going to give it a wee bit of a height here of, we'll leave it at 1.9 millimeters. Just going to add it on top, apply, and this time I'm coming straight up. I'm not putting a curve on it. You can see it's just coming up like so, and that looks pretty good. But you can see here I have a bit of a problem. This here is on top of the mane on both sides, so when I tilt this round you can see it's definitely sitting on top of it, and of course that's not what I want to do. That doesn't look right at all. So this time I'm going to select here and I'm going to merge those two together, and now you can see it merges into the mane, which is good. But my problem is the mane isn't coming over it in some places. It's not high enough. But I'll leave that as it is. I'll just apply that and I'll just take care of the rest of the halter first. So start a new component. I'm going to select here these little pieces here, which is the halter detail. And I'm going to put these on top of the halter, and I'm going to round them slightly. I'll come up at quite a steep angle. I'm going to lift it up a little bit above there, and I'm only going to have it 0.5 mil higher. So let's see what the effect of this is. So you can see it's coming up too high there. Something like that, I think, is what I'm after. So I'll start a new component. I'll select here, add that as well. Just apply that, see what it looks like. So I wanted this here a little bit higher than the rest of it, so I'm just going to add a little bit additional base height because that's the bit. So I'll leave it like that. Now I'm going to do a little bit about this mane here. So I'll just double click on it. That brings me to these here, and I can alter its parameters. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of base height to this here, because I want this here to separate itself from the horse's body as well. I think it will look a bit better if I do that. So I've raised it about 0.7 of a millimeter, and now the mane actually goes over the top of the halter, which looks good as well. So I'm going to start by selecting the actual mouth itself, create a new component. I'll remember to label it this time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract the mouth. You can see here it's sitting external. I want to subtract it from the model. And I'm going to subtract it by 2 millimeters here. And I can alter the shape slightly by there, but I want it to go in as steeply as possible, but I want it rounded. So I'm just going to leave it as a curve, and I'll apply that. Start a new component, and now I'm going to select the teeth and the tongue. And I want to add them to the mouth. I'll make them 1.44 millimeters high and apply that, and that gives me teeth. And that looks pretty good. Next I want to do the nostril, and again this one here should go into the body of the horse. So I'm going to set it 2 millimeters and subtract it and apply. That looks good. And also the folds of the neck that also define the cheek around here. Select that. Call that the folds. Go 2 millimeters, subtract that, and apply. And again, I'm using a rounded shape. And it's just a matter of playing around with these things here till you get them looking the way you want them to be. So lastly, I need to do the ear. So I'm going to grab this one here first, and this one here I want to curve out a little bit. So I'm just going to create a new component. I'll call this the back ear, or rear, maybe the rear ear, I think. Going at about 34-degree angle, make it dome, make it a millimeter high, just apply that. Let's see what it looks like. That's not too bad. I'll just leave it like that. It's going to give a bit of a curve to the back, and we'll finish that up later. Start a new component. Now this one here is the main ear itself, so I'm going to just bring that out a little bit. I'll add that to the model. And there it is, it's just popping out a little bit. Now I want to bring it out a little bit further, so I'm just going to add a little bit of So I'll try and get that sort of level with the halter. Oh, that's a bit too much. Now again, you can see I got the same problem here with the mane. But what I'll do next is I'll take this inner ear Whoops, I shouldn't have done that. I'll just start a new component now. I'll select the inner ear here, and I want to subtract this here from the main ear here, dish it out a little bit. And we'll just set a height of 2 millimeters. Looks a bit better. And we'll start a new component again and select that inner there. And again, I want to subtract that. Just apply that. Something along those lines there. Now what I also want to do is, and I should have done this earlier, I'll just close this, is I'll grab the ear here and I want to tilt it. So I want to bring this part forward of this point here. So we've got a tilt option here. So I want to tilt it. I'm going to hit set tilt. I'll go from here. It's the start, and this is the tip that I want to tilt, like so. And now I can come over here and set an angle of tilt. So if I go like that, you can see how far the ear tilts out. That's a wee bit much. I just want to tilt it a little bit. Maybe something like that. And I actually want to also set this type to merge, so it merges with the mane. Now at the moment the mane is still coming over it. I'll tilt that a little bit more. Just keep going until it's something like that. And there we have the basis for our horse. Having done a little bit more tweaking on it just to get heights and things looking right, I'm going to do some sculpting on it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new level, and I'm going to call that level Combined Model. We're just going to combine all the model parts, making this here up into one. So I'm just going to come up here to create a component from the visible model. And there we go. Now this is actually looking quite high now, and that's because it's actually adding this to the rest of these. So I'm just going to uncheck those. And now we're just looking at that new combined model that I made. So next I want to smooth the model out a little bit. So down here I can apply a smoothing filter. And simply by moving the slider I can apply either a large amount of smoothing, but as you can see it looks quite blurry when I do that. Well, I'm just going to add just a small amount of smoothing like that to smooth it out a little bit so the body looks a lot better, but I've still got good definition on things like this here, the halter, because I wanted that to be reasonably crisp and sharp. I'll just go OK, and now I want to do some modeling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the model there and come up here to Sculpt Visible Model. That gives me some tools here, and first I'm going to use is the smoothing tool here. I adjust the diameter of my brush and things. What I want to do is I want to smooth out this ear, because it shouldn't have a little hump in it there. It should just be basically just a nice smooth back of the far side here. So I'm just going to do that to it. That's not looking too bad. Now I also want to smooth over this ear here, because ears generally don't have sharp corners on them. At least mine doesn't anyway. So I'm just going to do that there, just smooth it out a bit. I'm going to smooth it out where it meets the hair as well. Now I might have overdone it just here, so I'm just going to undo that there. Undo that. Then I'll just redo it, but I'll just be a little bit careful this time. Something like that. You got the twiddle there, so you can actually rotate the model without worrying about accidentally making changes you don't want to. Come back into the smooth tool and I just smooth out around the eye here, pupil. Now I'm going to grab the smudge tool, and what I'm going to do is, it's like pushing clay, so I'm just going to create sort of smudge marks here where these here are defined. And try and give the mane a bit of definition here, and up here as well. And I can also give it more lines up here to actually give it some sort of a hair-like look, and I can also extend the ends of the manes down as well to give them a bit of definition as well. I'll just keep that. So basically, by playing around with things like this, you can add that little bit extra to it. And finally, when you're ready, you can actually scale the model to what size you want. It's 16.855. I'm just going to set it to 17.5 millimeters, which is half a millimeter thinner than my material. Go okay. And there we have it. Not too bad a looking horse at all. Wow, that's just incredible. This 3D stuff is unbelievable. It's almost as if you can feel it in your hand. If only you could see it.
But I can see it.
Don't be silly. You're not wearing the 3D glasses. Anything that can get me drawing in more than 2.5 dimensions has got to be good. And I've got to say, using Vectric Aspire to draw this model has been a pleasure. Now, the next question is, will it machine, and what will it look like when it's done? Well, who knows? We'll have to wait till the next episode to find that out. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. A big thank you goes out to Vectric for making this project possible. All that remains for me to do is to thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and join me next week when we'll be machining that model. Okay, well, what do you reckon? We should get this framed?
Throw it away.
Everyone's a critic.